Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to Mimileaks. Today we are finishing Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni's lawsuit against the New York Times. This is part 2 of 2, so if you didn't catch the first episode, please do so. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be waiting for you right here. And also, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. In part 1, we got into the meat of the lawsuit, that is, the factual allegations made against the Times. I will continue reading the facts of the case. Then, for the sake of time, I will summarize the causes of action and the remainder of the lawsuit. This is rich in visuals as compared to many other lawsuits, and I will put them on the screen as we get to them, but you should pause the video if you want to fully read any of these communications. And with that, let's get to it. 3. Lively sets the stage for coercion by drafting a protection letter that intentionally misrepresents the nature of the conversations had between Baldoni and/or Heath and Lively, demands Wayfarer party signs for Lively to return to work after industry strikes. Now that is a title. Principal photography began on May 15th of 24. From mid-June to early November 23, production was suspended due to the industry guild strikes. When strikes ended on November 9th of 23, production was eager to resume filming to make up for lost time. That same day, however, Wayfarer received an unsettling and unexpected email from Lively through her counsel, containing a 17-point list of non-negotiable conditions that must be met before Lively would return to work. Though Wayfarer disagreed as to the basis for requesting these conditions, the terms were agreeable, and some were already in place. For example, Lively demanded that an intimacy coordinator be present at all times when Lively was on set. In fact, an intimacy coordinator had already been engaged during the first half production, so Wayfarer took no issue with this request. Contrary to Lively's assertions, it was she who refused to meet with the coordinator to plan out scenes, putting Baldoni in the awkward position of meeting with the intimacy coordinator alone and later relaying scene suggestions to Lively in the intimacy coordinator's absence, not only defeating the purpose, but resulting in accusations by the Times that, before shooting began, Baldoni wanted to add scenes that Lively considered gratuitous. In fact, these scenes were proposed by the intimacy coordinator. This is a well-documented, in-handwritten note that Baldoni took during meetings with the intimacy coordinator. These notes from meetings with the coordinator were read to Lively at her penthouse, where she insisted they meet to write the scenes together. As it was, the scenes were not written, and it was always Baldoni's intention for them to be written with input from both the intimacy coordinator and Lively, the female gaze that Lively distorts in her complaint, and which the Times then published. In response to proposal from the coordinator that Ryle not simulate an intimate moment after he satisfied Lily, Lively remarked, "I'd be mortified if that happened to me." And Baldoni, following Lively's lead in what seemed like an attempt to connect and develop their characters, remarked, "Those have been some of the most beautiful moments with my wife and I." Lively again distorts this both in the protections for return to production and in the CRD complaint, which the Time published, as a fact, without any investigation whatsoever. First, this suggestion does not originate with Baldoni, and Lively knew this. Second, it was Lively who personalized the scenes, and third, and perhaps most importantly, they were writing scenes for their characters. Lively claims that Baldoni made her feel unsafe when he used the word sexy while discussing wardrobe, when in fact, Lively herself had previously indicated both verbally and in a text message that she wanted her character's wardrobe to be sexier. For a scene in which all characters wore onesies, Lively opted to wear a large coat over hers, obscuring the outfit. Baldoni, as the film's director, suggested that she remove the coat, explaining it would look sexier without it. Lively took offense to the comment and appeared upset, interpreting it negatively rather than as a creative direction. Feeling he had upset her, Baldoni apologized, despite having made a professional suggestion as a director. Notably, in a separate text exchange, Lively herself used the word sexy to describe one of the characters' outfits while advocating for her own wardrobe choice, an inconsistency that undermines the basis of her complaint. Lively established what language is acceptable to her and what isn't at the very outset of the relationship just 2 days into filming. To use this language herself, in turn, would make a note of each instance when her director used the same language. Also, to describe the wardrobing character is at best a double standard. To generate a list of demands insinuating that he and his business partner acted inappropriately and refused to work unless they agree to it is calculating and even extortionistic. But to then use Wayfarer, Baldoni, and Heath's agreement to not do something they already did not do, were not doing, and had no intention of doing, as the basis to file a non-public CRD complaint against them and release it to the public herself in order to ruin their reputations, is defamation. The Times was directly complicit in this. Lively also established very early that it was acceptable to be present when she was breastfeeding. Both Heath and Baldoni have children and are comfortable around breastfeeding mothers, and Lively seemed equally comfortable. In fact, Baldoni's wife co-founded a company that makes a breastfeeding garment, a prototype that originated with his mother when he was a baby. And, as revealed in text messages, Lively invited Baldoni to her trailer to rehearse lines while she was pumping. Lively now alleges that Baldoni and/or Heath would enter her makeup trailer of their own volition while she was breastfeeding, an activity she often conducted openly in the very presence of Baldoni and Heath. In the CRD complaint, published in part by The Times, Lively suggests that Heath walked in her trailer unannounced while in a state of undress and topless, which is false. Heath was invited into her trailer, along with a female producer, Baldoni, and a Sony representative, for a meeting requested by Lively. Heath arrived first to see if Lively was ready, and after knocking and being invited in, saw that she was breastfeeding. She was not topless. She was having makeup removed from her collarbone while fully covered. Heath asked if they should return later. Lively said no, they could move forward with the meeting as planned, and would meet them after she finished removing makeup. Roughly 2 weeks later, Lively announced she thought she had seen Heath make eye contact with her. Heath immediately apologized and said that he hadn't even realized he looked her way. In response, Lively remarked, "I know you weren't trying to cop a look." A reference to this incident conveniently showed up in a document 2 months later, distorted like the others, and out of context in a list that The Times later published. By the time Wayfarer received the protection for return to work production document, I'm gonna have to come up with another name for that. Wayfarer had invested millions, completed half the film, and incurred substantial costs in preparation to resume production immediately following the strikes. However, instead of returning to work as anticipated, they received Lively's list of demands. In the spirit of ensuring Lively felt comfortable on set, Wayfarer promptly agreed to her terms despite disagreeing with the insinuations underlying them. Neither Wayfarer, Heath, nor Baldoni had engaged in any of the behavior alluded to in the document. They thought that was the end of it, and they were ready to move ahead and make a great film. It was agreed that filming would resume on January 5th, 2024. On the evening of January 4th, Baldoni, Heath, producers Black and Sachs, a representative of Sony, and the film's first AD, were invited to Lively and Reynolds' penthouse in NYC. They arrived eager to discuss plans for the next day's filming, prepared with their production materials. Instead, they were blindsided by Lively and Reynolds, who presented a list of grievances that were both unanticipated and troubling. Reynolds launched into a tirade, berating Baldoni in what Baldoni later described as a traumatic encounter, stating that he had never been spoken to like that in his life. Reynolds demanded an apology to Lively for actions that were mischaracterized and demonstrably false. When Baldoni resisted apologizing, Reynolds became further enraged. Everyone, including the producer Lively, asked production to engage, and a rep of Sony that was in attendance left that meeting in shock. The producer offered that in his 40-year career, he had never seen anyone speak to someone like that in a meeting. The Sony rep mentioned that she would often think of that meeting, and her one regret is that she didn't stop Reynolds' berating of Baldoni. On the very first page of her complaint, Lively inaccurately claims that a list of 30 items were agreed upon during this meeting. This is categorically false. The 30-point list is strategically positioned to appear as if it were a standalone written document. However, No such document was ever presented to Baldoni, the Wayfarer team, or to their knowledge, anyone else, whether during that meeting or at any time, and therefore could not have been agreed to. In reality, many of these items were encountered for the first time in the complaint itself and include references to highly disturbing events that never occurred. The repeated use of the phrase "no more" before each demand falsely suggests that these alleged incidents had already previously taken place and needed to cease. The implication is not only misleading but entirely untrue. Baldoni and Heath left the meeting deeply unsettled by the implications of Lively and Reynolds' behavior and the power dynamics at play. Faced with mounting pressure and with financial implications of what shutting down a film would look like, Wayfarer made the difficult decision to resume production and finish the film, despite fears that Lively was intentionally manipulating facts for her own gain. The stakes were extraordinarily high. Financiers had invested substantial resources, hundreds of cast and crew members had endured months without work due to strikes, and nearly 5 years of development had gone into bringing this film to life. Filming resumed without further grievances or references to prior disputes from Lively, a fact that Lively concedes in her CRD complaint. And it goes as follows. The parties agreed to implement and follow the protections for return to production and ensure the film could be completed, marketed, and released safely and successfully. And it was. Production of the film resumed January 5th and concluded on February 9th, 2024. The film has been a resounding success. However, the lasting effects of Lively's allegations left Baldoni uneasy. He and Wayfarer continued to make considerable concessions throughout production, all in the interest of successfully delivering an outstanding film. 4. Lively takes over editing, fires the editor and composer, and creates her own version of the film at Wayfarer's expense, while the rightful director continues to edit his cut of the film. The Directors Guild of America mandates a 10-week protected period, during which the director of a feature film is entitled to privately edit and assemble the director's cut. This period is considered sacred, providing the director with uninterrupted time to creatively shape the final product, an opportunity to experiment, take risks, and refine until film fully reflects the artistic vision. For Baldoni, this period represents the pinnacle of the filmmaking process, a time to immerse himself in the creative craft, free of external influences. Unfortunately, he was denied this essential experience. Lively requested to join him in the editing bay. As a seasoned professional with over 20 years of experience in the industry, and having grown up in a family deeply involved in the field, Lively was fully aware of the implications of her request. In fact, her request explicitly acknowledged that it infringed upon Baldoni's protected period. Nonetheless, in the aftermath of the serious false allegations she has leveraged against the production, Baldoni, Wayfarer, and Sony reluctantly agreed to grant her access to the editing bay for 2 days. Notably, despite her allegations that Baldoni made her uncomfortable, she spent prolonged, close time with him in the confined and collaborative space of the editing bay. What began as a 2-day collaboration extended into 10 days, during which Lively sought to work alone in the editing bay without Baldoni. Despite him incorporating 7 pages of her notes into his own edit at the very onset, and consistently keeping her involved in every subsequent edit, Lively expressed dissatisfaction with mere collaboration, asserting that she too deserved the opportunity to see her creative vision realized. She requested exclusive time with the editors. In response, Wayfarer flew Baldoni's editor to New York to assist her in the process. Eventually, Lively fired the film's editors, replacing them with her own choice, specifically an editor often used by Reynolds. She also fired the film's award-winning composer, replacing him with the composers from Reynolds' recent project. Against repeated objections, Lively created her own cut of the film at Wayfarer's and Sony's expense. Sony later informed Wayfarer that Lively would not promote the film unless her demands were met. Believing that her edits would simply supplement Baldoni's work, he continued refining the director's cut. However, faced with the possibility of Lively refusing to promote the film or approve any related marketing material, a scenario that would be catastrophic, Wayfarer and Baldoni felt compelled to acquiesce. This included funding a friends and family screening of a version of a film that they had not approved or even seen, entirely at Lively's insistence. Having already invested millions of dollars, along with years of time, energy, and personal sacrifice, Wayfarer and Baldoni were left with no viable alternatives. Wayfarer and Sony found themselves in an unprecedented and uncomfortable predicament, two competing versions of the film created by two different individuals, one of whom had no contractual or creative right to edit, let alone produce their own cut. Faced with Lively's threat to withhold promotion of the film, the studio, though, reluctantly agreed to do an official audience test of both versions, Lively's cut and Baldoni's director's cut, once again at Wayfarer and Sony's expense. This decision was made with the understanding that Lively had agreed with Sony that, if Baldoni's director's cut tested higher, she would drop the matter and fully cooperate, and Baldoni could proceed finishing the film without her editorial interferences. Unsurprisingly, despite Baldoni's cut scoring significantly higher with audiences and the film's target demographic, Lively reneged on her promise. She insisted that her cut be the version released to the public, even going so far as to claim that the author of the book would also refuse to promote the film if her version was not chosen. Under immense pressure, Sony and Wayfarer once again conceded. 5. Lively demands a producer credit and an undeserved PGA mark. Under continued threat that, in spite of contractual obligation, Lively would not promote the film or approve marketing materials, Wayfarer agreed, at Sony's behest, to give Lively a producer credit. But her commands did not stop there. Lively later sought the coveted PGA mark on her producer credit, a certified designation licensed by the Producers Guild of America to identify producers who have performed the majority of the producing functions on a motion picture. Neither Baldoni nor Wayfarer felt she deserved or fulfilled the requisite criteria to earn this mark. Lively demanded that Baldoni, Heath, and other producers and department heads send letters to PGA in support of her certification. Despite unanimous recognition of the absurdity and the unsettling nature of what appeared to be an attempt at coercion, Sony and other parties ultimately acquiesced and submitted letters of support. However, because Lively did not perform the duties of a producer and therefore, in the professional opinion of the studios, did not qualify for the PGA mark, Wayfarer and Baldoni refused to misrepresent the contributions to the film. Despite having conceded on nearly every other demand, they believed it unjust and unethical to falsely represent to the PGA that she had fulfilled the requisite producing responsibilities. Lively, in turn, instructed Sony to tell Wayfarer and Baldoni that any goodwill left between us is done. Eventually, in the face of persistent threats levied against Wayfarer and Baldoni, they were left with little choice but to draft and sign a letter on Lively's behalf. Upon doing so, Heath provided a copy of the letter to Wayfarer's lawyers, accompanied by a statement indicating they signed the letter under duress. Lively proceeded to make good on her threat. B. Lively's successful bullying tactics result in Baldoni's exile from his own film. Consistent with her pattern of vindictiveness, as the premiere of the film approached, Lively instructed Sony that she and the cast would not participate in any promotion or marketing of the film alongside Baldoni. She made certain that Baldoni was removed from all artwork of the film, posters included, and stripped him of his A Film By credit. Further, Lively and Reynolds unfollowed him on social media, as did the author of the book, someone with whom Baldoni had maintained a 5-year personal relationship, and for whom Baldoni created this opportunity, and other cast members, creating the false impression that Baldoni had done something wrong. It became clear that Lively was working diligently to contrive a narrative that would explain why she took over the film and exiled Baldoni. He had no intention of ever making this information public. He promoted the film as originally intended, gave her full credit and praise, and wanted the film to succeed. He wanted to move on. Lively, however, refused to let it go. Baldoni later received word that, during a premiere of his movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, Reynolds approached Baldoni's agent at the William Morris Endeavor and demanded that the agent drop Baldoni. The wielding of power and influence became undeniable. Baldoni and Wayfarer grew increasingly fearful of what Lively and Reynolds were capable of, as their actions seemed aimed at destroying his career and his personal life. Lively systematically excluded him from all marketing and promotional events with her and the cast of the film. He was not invited to any promotional events, screenings, premieres, photo shoots, or other cast campaigns. Baldoni was marginalized from the marketing process and left in the dark about the purported marketing plan, allegedly created by Lively and Sony, which was later referenced in her complaint as agreed to by all. While in Sweden celebrating his wife's birthday, Baldoni was informed that Lively demanded he not attend the premiere on August 9, 2024. Lively further threatened that if Baldoni attended, she and the majority of the cast would boycott. It remained unclear what Lively had communicated or promised to the cast, but they now also refused to attend if Baldoni was present. The fact that Sony advised Wayfarer to concede underscores Lively and Reynolds' immense power and influence. Baldoni and Wayfarer refused to succumb to the bullying tactics aimed at preventing them from attending the premiere of their film, a project they financed, produced, and owned. This threat marked the culmination of a year-long campaign of intimidation and harassment. Although objectively egregious and shocking, the Wayfarer team unfortunately had grown accustomed to the bullying, fully aware of the immense power this couple wielded and the far-reaching extent of influence. However, they refused to concede to this demand. Just days before the premiere, Baldoni was unsure if he would even be allowed to attend. His family, his friends, many traveling from outside New York, were left in limbo, unable to finalize travel plans or book flights. Finally, through Sony, Wayfarer persuaded Lively to permit Baldoni and the Wayfarer team, along with friends and family, to attend, although only during under demeaning and humiliating conditions. They were relegated to a separate theater to view the film, were required to arrive at a different time than the rest of the cast, and instructed to leave the venue immediately after Lively arrived. Baldoni was also excluded from the official celebrity after-party, despite it being an event paid for by Wayfarer. As a result, Baldoni had to quickly organize and personally fund a separate after-party, forcing the company to cover costs for two events, one for Lively and one for their own friends, family, crew, and team. Upon arrival, Baldoni began participating in red carpet photos and interviews. However, he was abruptly cut short when it was conveyed that Lively was on her way. He and his family were quickly ushered away. Security and personnel, acting as though there was a risk of escape, escorted Baldoni's group to the basement of the building. There, they were confined to a makeshift area surrounded by a concession stand stock with only fold-out tables and chairs arranged in a square. Surrounded by close friends, family, soda bottles, and a lot of love, the irony of being held in a basement on what was arguably one of the most important nights of his career thus far was not lost on anyone. Once the main theater was deemed clear of Lively and her guests, Baldoni and his group were ushered into a separate theater to view the film. At the conclusion of the screening, they were again quickly escorted away and out of the building to avoid even a chance of interaction with Lively and her guests. The Wayfarer after-party, held separately from the celebrity event, was a dry gathering, reflecting the values and themes that Wayfarer stands for. It was attended by the entire Wayfarer team from Los Angeles and their friends and family. The atmosphere and tone of the Wayfarer after-party was aligned with Baldoni's vision for the film, focusing on celebration and gratitude. In the meantime, Baldoni was sidelined as Lively and Sony pressed forward with the promotional strategy of the film. This plan, outlined in his initial proposal to Sony years prior and shared with Lively, and communicated numerous times to both Sony and Lively, centered on a partnership with the No More organization. Founded in 2013, No More is a global initiative aimed at raising awareness, inspiring action, and sparking conversations to end DV. Baldoni's collaboration with the organization began in 2022. Staying true to the purpose for undertaking the film, he prioritized amplifying the voices of survivors of DV. His efforts reflected the heart of the film story and its profound impact on audiences. He returned to the core reason for embarking on the project in the first place, his initial outreach to the author 5 years earlier. Focusing on the film's message and its potential to create positive change, Baldoni poured himself into ensuring its success despite the mounting challenges. These genuine efforts aimed at amplifying voices of survivors impacted by the film were later mischaracterized and weaponized against Baldoni. The Times, failing to do any due diligence before publishing the article, describes these genuine efforts to bring attention to a serious issue as part of a calculated campaign to destroy Lively's reputation, and in doing so, participated in destroying plaintiffs' lives. C. Baldoni forced to hire Crisis PR to combat Lively's negative press push. In direct response to Lively's oppressive tactics, Wayfarer and Baldoni hired Nathan and Tag as protective measure ahead of the film's premiere. Contrary to the Times' portrayal, Tag's engagement focused exclusively on defensive strategy and fact verification. Through, as is industry practice, Tag prepared for worst-case scenarios. No aggressive tactics were ever employed. Tag maintained this defensive position throughout its engagement, verifying facts and correcting misinformation without retaliation, a strategy endorsed by Baldoni and Wayfarer. Meanwhile, let me switch to it. Lively's publicist, Sloan, launched a negative press push against Baldoni. At least as early as August 1st, 2024, Tag was made aware of Sloan planting an unfavorable, false, defamatory story about Baldoni's faith into Page 6. Sloan proceeded to feed false stories to the Daily Mail and Post, containing allegations that Baldoni was a predator. Sloan would also plant false stories alleging that there were multiple HR complaints during production. This, in addition to Sloan's weaponizing Baldoni and Wayfarer, hiring Tag and Nathan. You might want to pause as I flip through. This particular visual is hard to read, so let me magnify it for you. In spite of Sloan's efforts to lambast Baldoni and Nathan, it was Lively who ultimately stirred up her own public ridicule. And here you'll see some articles that give reference to that, which I highlighted a couple of them. Blake Lively goes into damage control, finally addressing the DV in It Ends With Us amid criticism over tone-deaf film promo. And people are disgusted by Lively's cutesy press tour for It Ends With Us. Also, Blake Lively dragged for marketing light of DV. And the Ends With Us promo has failed domestic violence survivors like me. Indeed, while Baldoni sought to focus on the film's central premise, Lively incensed audiences with seemingly flippant and tone-deaf remarks, encouraging viewers to grab your friends and wear your florals. Embarrassed by this self-induced backlash, Lively now seeks to vilify Baldoni in a dubious attempt to resuscitate her public image. While the Times alleges an offensive smear campaign concocted by the plaintiffs, the incomplete and misleading evidence supplied by Lively, and on which the Times relies upon, proffers a warped view of reality. Setting aside the unscrupulous means by which the communications were obtained, the Times, as with Lively's complaint, deliberately takes these communications out of context to bolster a false narrative. When viewed in full context, these hand-picked doctors' communications lose their manufactured impropriety and disprove Lively's allegations. And again, there's more on the screen. Please pause if you need to. In the article, The Times writes, Lively's filing includes excerpts of thousands of pages of text and emails that she obtained through a subpoena. These and other documents were reviewed by the New York Times. However, the Times failed to review and/or investigate the plethora of communications demonstrating that plaintiffs had zero intention of smearing Lively and every intention of simply promoting the film and its message. Worse still, there are documented communications overlooked by Lively and the Times that expressly refute Lively's erroneous accusation. By way of example, please see the one on the screen. Though the Times admits that it had access to thousands of relevant text messages and emails, its skewed reporting made painfully obvious that it failed to substantiate the false accusations hurled by Lively. Indeed, the objective evidence refutes any allegation that plaintiffs engaged in a smear campaign to bury Lively and destroy her reputation. Lively's wound was entirely self-inflicted. That plaintiffs retained crisis PR to defend against her claims and unrelenting assault does not change this fact. D. Stephanie Jones discloses confidential communications. And we might actually get to that one. Might not, but just know that neither Lively's complaint nor the article make any mention of embattled publicist Jones, the former publicist to Wayfarer, who now insists in a separate lawsuit that she's swept up in the plaintiff's so-called smear campaign. And yet on August 14th, 2024, Jones sent an email to Heath detailing her recommended strategy, which is on screen. Wayfarer later terminated Jones for, among other things, having allegedly leaked information to the Daily Mail despite specific instructions not to. Jones is notorious for exacting her revenge on any client brave enough to escape her grasp. She is equally notorious for her alleged maltreatment of current and former employees alike. Wayfarer and Abel are no exception. It's hardly coincidence that all of the communications on which Lively and the Times now rely were purportedly produced by Jones' company, Jones Works LLC, pursuant to subpoena. The propriety of this alleged subpoena is unverified and, at a minimum, highly questionable given Jones's involvement and the means by which she first obtained these communications. Abel, a former employee of Jones Works, was forced to relinquish her electronic devices when confronted by a security guard and attorney upon her separation from the company. 6 weeks after she put in her notice and shared her plan to start her own business, Jones, on the heels of a damning Business Insider article and hemorrhaging clients, insisted that Abel turn over her electronic devices to allow them to delete all confidential and proprietary information. Though Jones initially agreed to release Abel's personal cell phone number, she reneged. 4 months later, Abel's text messages are now the subject of Lively's complaint and article. Plaintiffs are informed and believe that Jones invited the subject subpoena to circumvent her confidentiality obligations to Wayfarer and inflict the most unethical form of revenge. E. The Times publishes a false and defamatory article based on Lively's administrative complaint. The New York Times is one of the most widely read newspapers in the United States and, once upon a time, served as the primary newspaper of record, publishing all the news that's fit to print. The Times was considered a paragon of journalistic integrity and excellence, the gold standard for journalism in the U.S., and a highly respected new outlet internationally. I think they mean news outlet internationally. For generations, the paper's historical influence on the socio-political and cultural life of the country and its institutions could not be overstated. Americans long relied on the Times as a source of accurate and balanced news reporting. Viewpoint-based commentary, was expressly excluded from news stories. Indeed, for years, Americans grew to expect that the Times would, as legendary Times executive editor A.M. Rosenthal said, tell it straight, or, in other words, simply report the news without embellishing or driving it. For much of its storied history, whether it was the Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, Watergate, or other political and cultural issues, through its objective, investigative reporting and the diverse views presented in its op-ed pages, the Times strove to inform America through high journalistic standards, accuracy, and fairness. The publication has won far more Pulitzer Prizes than any other media company in U.S. history, with its first being awarded more than 100 years ago. But over the last 20 years, Times reporters have ever more frequently veered spectacularly from their own journalistic guidelines. As a result, it has become commonplace to find the Times and their stories containing egregious factual errors or infected with bias. Such lapses have contributed to the public distrust of the Times and a landscape where partisan actors can cry fake news with some justification. But the New York Times still wields a powerful and influential megaphone in the media and greater society. It is, therefore, under a solemn obligation to do the work necessary to get its reporting right. As reporters at the Times well know, getting it wrong can lead to disastrous outcomes for story subjects, including financial, professional, and reputational ruins. And the Times sets the narrative and tone for other news organizations, amplifying the impact of its mistakes. The instant case is emblematic of the Times having lost its way, as the facts here make plain that the Times failed to follow its own journalistic standards, rushed to judgment, and, with careless disregard, published a story accusing plaintiffs of waging a smear campaign against Lively, causing a feeding frenzy based on the demonstrably false premise. At 9:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 20th, 2024, Tuohy requested plaintiffs' response to its reporting regarding a crisis communication operation conducted on behalf of Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, and Wayfarer Studios to protect the reputations and harm Blake Lively's, as described in a legal complaint filed today. Tuohy wrote in part, "We are seeking your response to the claims of retaliation through this PR campaign, and we will welcome the opportunity to talk to you on the record. Please offer any on-the-record comment as well as any other information you think we should know. Additionally, please notify us of any inaccuracies. We need to hear back from you tomorrow by noon Eastern." At 2:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, plaintiffs' legal representatives responded as follows. "It is shameful that Ms. Lively and her representatives would make such serious and categorically false accusations against Mr. Baldoni, Wayfarer Studios, and its representatives, as yet another desperate attempt to fix her negative reputation, which was garnered from her own remarks and actions during the campaign for the film, interviews, and press activities that were observed publicly in real time and unedited, which allowed for the internet to generate their own views and opinions. These claims are completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious, with an intent to publicly hurt and rehash a narrative in the media. Wayfarer Studios made the decision to proactively hire a crisis manager prior to the marketing campaign of the film to work alongside their own representative with Jones Works, employed by Stephanie Jones, due to the multiple demands and threats made by Ms. Lively during production, which included her threatening not showing up to set, threatening to not promote the film, ultimately leading to its demise during release, if her demands were not met. It was also discovered that Ms. Lively enlisted her own representative, Leslie Sloan, with Vision PR, who also represents Mr. Reynolds, to plant negative and completely fabricated and false stories with media, even prior to any marketing had commenced for the film, which was another reason why Wayfarer Studios made the decision to hire a crisis professional to commence internal scenario planning in the case they needed to address. The representatives of Wayfarer Studios still did nothing proactive nor retaliated, and only responded to the incoming media inquiries to ensure balanced and factual reporting and monitored social activity. What is pointedly missing from the cherry-picked correspondence is the evidence that there were no proactive measures taken with media or otherwise, just internal scenario planning and private correspondence to strategize, which is standard operating procedure with public relations professionals. At 10:11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 21st, 2024, the Times published the article. Notwithstanding that the Times was made aware of the egregiously defamatory allegations contained therein, it proceeded with publication without further inquiry. Indeed, in its rush to publish a one-sided, unsubstantiated story on behalf of Lively, the Times got it dramatically wrong. The aftershocks have been disastrous for plaintiffs, and they now, reluctantly and knowing the damage cannot be fully undone, bring suit to hold the Times accountable for its egregious misfire. I'll be summarizing from here through the rest of the article. First cause of action, libel. The article published on December 21st, 2024, creates a narrative that the plaintiffs orchestrated a smear campaign against Lively, when instead, the negative sentiment against Lively is her own long-standing reputational issues with the public. The article falsely portrays the plaintiffs as motivated to harm Lively, when in fact, the opposite is true. It is apparent that the defendants and each of them either recklessly disregarded the truth or knew the story was outright false, based on the Times' claim of reviewing thousands of pages of texts and emails. The defendants' malice is evident, as the decision to publish occurred without affording the plaintiffs a meaningful opportunity to respond due to their lack of verifying the documentation and without offering a modicum of impartiality. As a direct and proximate result, plaintiffs have suffered general and special damages in an amount of not less than $250 million, including damage to plaintiffs' reputations, community standings, and due to the shame, mortification, embarrassment, humiliation, damage to peace of mind, emotional distress, and injury in their occupations. The defendant's conduct warrants an award of punitive and exemplary damages. And I'm flipping through this as I'm summarized. The words I'm reading here are not verbatim the words on the page, but they are it in summary. The article, by cherry-picking private communications and exaggerating plaintiffs' roles in negative public sentiment towards Lively, falsely depicted them as orchestrating a smear campaign. This portrayal is highly offensive and inaccurately characterizes plaintiffs' defensive motivations. Defendants knew or acted with reckless disregard of the truth, given their possession of private communications, refuting these claims. Plaintiffs assert that they were not afforded a reasonable opportunity to respond and that the defendants' actions were malicious, causing significant harm. The plaintiffs seek $250 million in compensatory damages for the distress and damage inflicted by the defendant's actions, and the defendant's conduct, based on the above, warrants an award of punitive and exemplary damages. Third cause of action, promissory fraud, and here they reset the timeline pre-publication. The reporter for the Times emailed the plaintiffs around 9:45 p.m. on December 20th, offering until noon the following day to respond, then publishing the article short of that deadline at 10:11 a.m. Plaintiffs are informed and believe that the Times, coordinating with Lively and or her team, aligned the publication of the article with the filing of her CRD complaint. Plaintiffs contend that the defendants misrepresented their intent to allow their time to respond to allegations before publishing the article, and that this false promise led them to rely on the given deadline to their detriment, lacking in journalistic ethics and resulting in significant harm. Fourth cause of action, breach of implied-in-fact contract. Plaintiffs allege here similarly that the reporter for the Times contacted them about the forthcoming publication of an article, giving them until noon the next day to respond. Plaintiffs accepted this offer and began preparing their response. However, the Times broke their agreement by publishing the article ahead of the deadline, depriving the plaintiffs of the opportunity to address their allegations. Plaintiffs claim they suffered harm from this breach, and seek compensation for the resulting damages. prayer for relief, to summarize, plaintiffs seek general, special, punitive damages, costs, attorney's fees, and other appropriate relief for harm caused by defendants' defamatory statements and misconduct. And then last is the demand for jury trial. And that is Baldoni and Wayfarer's complaint against the New York Times. Now that you've heard both Lively and Baldoni's description of events surrounding the filming and release of It Ends With Us, what do you think? Baldoni's attorney has stated their intent to pursue litigation against Blake Lively and promised to show Blake Lively's pattern of bullying. And Blake Lively filed suit against Justin Baldoni in New York federal court on December 31st, in addition to the complaint filed with the California Civil Rights Department on December 20th. And then there's the lawsuit brought by Baldoni's former publicist, alleging breach of contract. I have not looked at that lawsuit. Perhaps it's a story for another day. We shall see what happens with this whole entire story. For now, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.